Hello and welcome to today's video where we are going to be looking at graphing. In specific, we are going to be looking at something called a histogram. And if you are not familiar with what a histogram is, you are going to find that it is very much like a bar graph with a couple of different caveats to it. The first is that we no longer deal with categories down at the bottom. We're now dealing with ranges. So we're looking at numbers that are going to be in a range, and then we are looking at something called frequency on the left. And frequency is just a fancy term that means how many times does that happen? So the number of times that something will fall into a specific range. Now that might not make a lot of sense just off the top, but as we're organizing our data, I will make reference to that again, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding by the time the video is done. So the first thing we need to know about a histogram is that oftentimes we're going to get sets of data that is what's called raw. And raw data is simply data that is unorganized. And it's our job as people who do math to organize that data to make it easier for us to read, so when people are looking at our graphs, they can actually get something from it. So what we're going to do is we are going to organize this data, and the awesome thing about histograms is that once you have your data organized, it really becomes simple just transferring it over into bars that you're going to use. So let's take a look and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's pretend that these numbers right here represent the number of hours worked in some type of place of employment by all of the employees for, I don't know, a day or something along those lines. Doesn't matter. So we'll just call them number of hours to start. Now, as you can see, we have a wide variety of numbers. We had someone who only worked 2 hours, and we had someone who worked as much as 13 hours in one day. And if we're putting these into ranges, what we need to do is we need to make sure that every single number that is in our data gets accounted for. So we have to keep that in mind when we're creating our range. Now, you as the graph creator get to use whatever range you want. So if you wanted to go in groups of, say, 3, if you wanted to go in groups of 5, it will change the overall looking graph, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. One of the things that I will tell you, though, is that the smaller your range is, the more accurate your graph will look. So the more you can analyze specific data, okay? Now, we'll talk about that in a second. So first of all, let's start with looking at our lowest number, which was 2, our highest number, which was 13. So we're going to create some equal amounts of ranges in between there. So why don't we just start with something like 0 to 2. And then one of the things that you'll want to remember is that you do not want to overlap your ranges here. So we don't want to start our next number at 2 to 4, because if we did that, let's say we had a 2, which one would it go into? Would it go into 0 to 2, or would it go into 2 to 4? It can only fall in once because we do have only one number there, that is 2. So if it ended up in two different graphs, or two different ranges rather, it's going to skew what our graph looks like. So let's say we're going to go 3 to 4, and then we'll go 5 to 6, we'll go 7 to 8, we'll go 9 to 10, and then maybe we'll go 11 plus. So anything beyond 11 will be counted into this category. Now, before we start doing any work, let's check and make sure that our numbers actually fall into these ranges. Okay, so if we take a look here at our first number, 8, it will fall into this range. It's the only place it can go because it's telling us that anything between 7 and 8 will go there. If I look at 2, it'll fall there. 4 will go there. 7.5 will go there because that is between 7 and 8. So even though there's a decimal number, 7.5 does fall in between there. And if we go through 10, yes, 11, yes, 5, yes, 6, yes, 8, yes, 12, yes, we'll go into the 11 plus, 11, yes, 9, and then 6.5. Uh-oh, wait a second. 6.5. This goes 5 to 6. This goes 7 to 8. So where would 6.5 go? Well, mathematically, it doesn't fit anywhere in these ranges. So that means that we're going to have to do a completely different set of ranges for this. So let's do that. Let me grab my eraser here, and I'm just going to change the ranges. So let's change this up. let's go 0 to 2, and then maybe we'll go, let's say 3 to 5, and then 6 to, let's say 9, and then 10 to, let's say 12, and then we'll go 13 plus. Now I've changed the ranges here, so let's again double check and make sure that our decimal numbers actually have a place to go this time. So I know all the whole numbers worked last time, but the decimals didn't. So let's take a look at 7.5. 7.5 will fall in this category now. 6.5, which was our problem last time, did not have a category, but 6.5 will fall into a category here now. And then 10.5 will fall into a category here, and 13 has its own. So we know for sure that every single number is accounted for. Now, this is important to remember. This group of numbers is going to become our bars down here. These are our ranges that we are going to do. And now we just have to determine how many times do each of these things show up. So what we'll do here is I'm going to do a tally of each of these ranges and cross out the numbers as I see them. So if I'm looking at number 8, I know it goes here because 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all accounted for. So 8 will go there. 2 will go there, 4, and I'll cross these out, 7.5, 10, 11, 5, 6, 8 again, 12, 11, 9, 6.5, 10.5, and finally 13. So you can see that every single number is now crossed off, and here's how this creates the graph. This becomes the bottom of the graph, this part right here, and this becomes the left-hand side of the graph, which was the frequency. So we'll label this frequency, and we'll label these ranges. So let's take a look. We've got 0 to 2. So 0, let's see, 0 to 2. And then we'll go 3 to 5, and then we'll go 6 to 9, we'll go 10 to 12, and then we'll finally go 13 plus. Okay, now I wrote these because if I stretch them out too long, my bars are going to be really big. So now let's take a look at how many times these happen. The largest number I have is 6, so essentially all I need to do is, yours would be much more equal because you're using graph paper. I'm just going to label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So now here's how a histogram resembles a bar graph. I'm going to take my 0 to 2 category and I'm going to make a bar that goes up and then comes over. Now this bar represents 0 to 2. If I take a look at 3 to 5, it happened twice. There were two numbers between 3 and 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the bar connected, go up to 2, and bring it back down. Of course, you would be using a ruler. And then if I take a look at 6 to 9, that's a big category. That went up to 6. I'm going to continue the bar all the way up to 6. And then I'm going to come back down, straight as I can, using free hands. And then I'm going to go up to, this was 5, even though it doesn't look like 5, it was 5. So I'm going to carry this over here. And then 13 was a single 1. This is a histogram. You can see it's different from bar graphs a little bit because there's no gap in between those bars. And that's an important thing to remember about histograms, is that they do not have a gap as you go through them. Now, before I do a little bit of a recap, I do want to show you something. Let's pretend that one of these categories was 0. What would you do in a situation like that? Well, in a situation where there is a 0, you simply just erase the line, or you just don't even put the bar in there. You skip that category. You still have to have it because you are doing all of those ranges. So let's pretend that the 10 to 12 was a 0. I would simply just have that bar erased. It's not a very good erase job. Simply have that bar erased. The first bars would connect together, and then there would be a gap there. And that is okay in a histogram because you are still connecting these and just showing that there were no responses. It didn't happen any times. So this line meant 0. There was 0 frequency of that happening. In this case, though, that's not what we have, so I'm just going to redraw that so you can see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to come across to 5, and then come back down again to represent our data. So that is histograms kind of in a nutshell. It's all about organizing raw data and putting them into ranges. The things that you need to remember are that anytime you are dealing with a range, you need to make sure that every single number will fall into a category only one time. So the second thing would be do not overlap your categories, or your ranges rather. You want to make sure that there is space in between. You want to make sure that they don't overlap from the standpoint that they don't end up in two separate bars that will skew your data. Last thing, or the third thing that we're going to talk about, is that these bars will always stay connected unless there is a 0, unless something shows up 0, in which case you don't even put the bar and just continue reconnecting the lines as you see them. So that is histograms. Hopefully this helps clarify some things for you as you're working through graphing. If you have any questions, by all means, please leave a comment below. You're welcome to subscribe and share the video and rewatch it as you see fit. And again, thanks for tuning in.